In keeping with the experimental nature of the V-class, following the V-1s, the U.S. built another sub between May 1st of 1925 and April 2nd of 1928. This was the utterly massive 3,046-ton surfaced and 4,161-ton submerged V-4. She would be the largest conventional sub ever built by the U.S. Whereas the V-1s were meant to test the concept of a fleet sub, V-4 was meant to be a test for the concept of a dedicated mine layer sub. As such, she didn't need high speed. Instead, endurance was the requirement, and she got it. On the plus side, she set a new record for diving depth and introduced 240-volt AC power. This allowed motors to be significantly smaller, which freed up space in the engine rooms. On the downside, she needed that room because, like her predecessors, her engines constantly had to be worked on due to their unreliability. Also, despite her size, the need to carry a large number of mines and the lack of emphasis on speed meant her engine room was relatively small and crowded. Being so large, of course, also meant she was very slow to dive, hard to maneuver, and easy to detect. As things turned out, she never laid a single mine in anger. Instead, in early 1942, she was converted to a more useful role: covert operations transport. Main armament was originally 4 forward 21-inch torpedo tubes for 16 torpedoes. 2 6-inch 53 caliber open-mount deck guns were also carried. At the stern were 2 40-inch mine chutes for the laying of up to 60 of the specially made for her Mark 11 mines. These were 1,875-pound moored mines with a 500-pound TNT warhead. Propulsion on the surface was 2 diesel engines that developed 2,800 horsepower for a surface speed of 15 knots. While submerged, she used 2 battery-powered electric motors that produced 2,200 horsepower for a top speed of 7 knots. Diving depth was increased to 300 feet. Like the V-1s, she was heavily modified. In February of 1931, she was renamed Argonaut. In early 1942, she underwent a massive overhaul to convert her from her old role of mine layer to a new one of clandestine transport. Her mine-laying gear and tubes were removed, which left plenty of room for a couple dozen Marines. 2 external torpedo tubes were fitted for 4 aft torpedoes, along with a torpedo data computer, or TDC. Again, more on that later. Her old diesel engines were also replaced with 2 new ones that produced 3,600 horsepower. Finally, her radar and sonar were upgraded. Argonaut was patrolling near Midway Island on December 7, 1941. That evening, she spotted 2 destroyers that had been sent to shell the island simultaneous to the Pearl Harbor raid. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to attack, and the 2 got away. In late January, she returned to the West Coast and began her conversion to a transport sub. Her first real action would come August 8, 1942. This, however, wasn't the famous Guadalcanal invasion, but rather a simultaneous raid with near-sister Nautilus on the soon-to-be infamous Makin Island. 120 Marine raiders were landed and generally did what raiders do before returning to the subs and making their escape. A few months later, she transferred to the Solomons and began patrolling there. On January 10, 1943, she attacked a convoy escorted by 4 destroyers. Forced to the surface by depth charge damage, she was shelled and sunk with all hands.